Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories just like this. At exactly 9:17 in the morning, the boardroom doors clicked shut and locked. It was an automatic, routine security measure. No one in the room even looked up. All eyes were fixed on the CEO, Daniel Whitmore, the most powerful man in the company. He was just moments away from publicly firing an employee, a calculated move designed to send a clear message to everyone else in the room. He believed he controlled the room, the company, everything. What he didn't realize was that the quiet woman seated near the back wasn't there to be fired. She was there to end his career. And in less than 20 minutes, the entire balance of power inside the company was about to flip permanently. For nearly a decade, Hawthorne Biotech had been one of the fastest-growing medical device firms in the country. Its CEO, Daniel Whitmore, was a star. He was praised in business magazines, invited to speak at leadership conferences, and had built his entire brand on 3 words: precision, authority, and control. Inside the company, however, employees would have described the atmosphere with a different word: fear. Meetings at Hawthorne weren't collaborative brainstorming sessions. They were performances, and everyone was expected to play their part perfectly. That morning's emergency board meeting was no exception. Whitmore had summoned all his department heads to address what he was calling internal sabotage. Sales numbers had dipped after a whistleblower complaint had triggered a regulatory review of one of their flagship products, a cardiac monitoring device. Someone, he insisted, was actively trying to undermine the company from within. But this meeting wasn't just about falling numbers. 3 weeks earlier, a senior compliance analyst named Rachel Marino had submitted a detailed report. In it, she questioned some serious irregularities she had found in the testing data for that very same device. Her report never reached the regulators. It was quietly rerouted, and Rachel was suddenly reassigned. Then, she was isolated. Now, here she was, seated at the far end of the long boardroom table, her hands folded calmly in her lap, waiting. Whitmore began the meeting with a grand speech about loyalty, about trust, and about consequences. He accused unnamed internal actors of risking thousands of jobs with their reckless actions. Then, he turned his attention directly to Rachel. He projected a single email onto the large screen at the front of the room. It was an email she had sent to upper management, simply requesting clarification about discrepancies she'd found in the clinical trial timelines. "You're suggesting data manipulation," Whitmore said, his voice cold and steady. "Do you understand the damage such accusations cause?" Rachel didn't flinch. She met his gaze and replied, "I'm suggesting transparency. You could feel the air in the room shift." It was a direct challenge, and everyone knew it. Whitmore, undeterred, announced her immediate suspension, effective right now. As he spoke, a security guard stepped closer to the door. And that's when everything changed. Rachel calmly reached into her briefcase. She didn't pull out a protest letter or a resignation notice. Instead, she took out a sealed envelope. She slid it across the polished surface of the table, directly toward the board chair. "I believe this belongs to you," she said. Inside that envelope was a federal authorization badge. Rachel Marino wasn't just a compliance analyst from some obscure department. She was a confidential investigator working with a joint task force that was reviewing irregularities in medical device approvals across multiple corporations, including Hawthorne Biotech. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Whitmore actually laughed at first, assuming it was some kind of desperate, theatrical bluff. Then, Rachel placed a small digital recorder on the table. "This meeting," she said evenly, "is now part of an active federal inquiry." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. Whitmore's smirk hardened into a scowl. "This is absurd," he said. "You've misrepresented yourself to gain access to this company." "No," Rachel replied calmly. "I was hired through your standard vetting process." I simply didn't disclose my secondary assignment, which legally I was not required to do. Several board members exchanged nervous glances, their confidence in Whitmore visibly cracking. Rachel continued, her voice never wavering. For the past 6 months, I've been reviewing internal communications related to the cardio pulse monitor. Specifically, communications involving accelerated approval timelines and suppressed adverse event reports. A board member finally broke the silence. "Are you accusing this company of fraud?" he asked, his voice strained. "I'm stating," Rachel said carefully, choosing her words, "that internal emails show that concerns were raised about incomplete safety data. Those concerns were then overridden." Whitmore stood up abruptly, slamming his hand on the table. "This is a coordinated attack," he snapped. "Our competitors would love to destabilize us." Rachel didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "I'm not here for your competitors. I'm here for the patients." Then, she projected her own slide onto the screen. It wasn't dramatic or flashy. It was just a time-stamped email chain. But one message stood out, stark and undeniable. From Daniel Whitmore, subject, "Proceed anyway." The body of the email was just 3 words. "Delay is not an option. Proceed anyway." The entire boardroom froze. That message had been sent just days before the final regulatory submission for the device. Whitmore scrambled to recover. "Context matters," he said quickly. That email was referring to marketing timelines, not safety data. Rachel just nodded. "That's what you stated during your deposition last week." Several heads snapped toward her. "Deposition?" "Yes," Rachel confirmed. "You were interviewed under oath regarding your company's compliance practices. You denied any direct involvement in timeline decisions for clinical trials." She clicked to the next slide. It showed calendar logs detailing private meetings between Whitmore and the clinical trials director on the exact dates that her report had flagged as problematic. "This documentation," she stated, "directly contradicts your sworn statement." The board chair leaned back in his seat. Slowly, he looked at his CEO, a man he had trusted completely. "Daniel," he said quietly, "is this accurate?" Whitmore's authority, once absolute, now looked fragile, almost pathetic. He glanced toward his legal counsel, who was suddenly very interested in studying the patterns on the carpet. But Rachel wasn't finished. In addition to the internal emails, we also obtained metadata from the revised safety reports. Sections that documented adverse patient reactions were edited just hours before the final submission. The original, unedited versions remain archived on your servers. A board member whispered, "This could trigger a federal recall." Rachel didn't react. "This investigation is ongoing," she announced. But as of this morning, federal regulators have been officially notified the power dynamic in the room had completely inverted. The man who once controlled everyone's careers now faced a jury of his own board members. The security guard was no longer standing near Rachel. He was standing uncertainly by the door, unsure of who to watch. Whitmore attempted one final, desperate maneuver. "You infiltrated this company under false pretenses," he accused, pointing a finger at Rachel. "That's unethical." Rachel met his furious gaze without blinking. "I was hired to ensure compliance," she said. "And that's exactly what I did." The board chair called for a recess. Whitmore was asked to remain in the room. As Rachel gathered her documents and quietly walked out, the employees in the hallway could sense that something profound had just shifted. Within 48 hours, Hawthorne Biotech announced a major internal review. Within a week, Daniel Whitmore stepped down, pending investigation. Regulators issued a formal inquiry into the cardiopulse device's entire approval process. But here's what makes this story so remarkable. Rachel hadn't entered Hawthorne to destroy it. She had entered it to protect it from the quiet, creeping consequences of unchecked power. Because organizations don't collapse overnight in a single spectacular event. They erode slowly, one bad decision at a time, when fear replaces accountability. Rachel's hidden identity wasn't about deception, it was about exposure. Exposure of the critical decisions made behind closed doors. Exposure of the emails that were never meant to see the light of day. And exposure of a corporate culture that believed authority was the same thing as immunity. When the dust finally settled, one thing became crystal clear: real power isn't overturned by force. It's overturned by evidence, but the investigation didn't end there. Weeks later, a second company in the same industry announced a voluntary suspension of one of its own devices, citing internal inconsistencies. And as investigators dug deeper, they discovered something unexpected. An executive from that second company had attended a private leadership retreat hosted by Daniel Whitmore just months before their own questionable approval process began. Was it just a coincidence, or was it a pattern? That, my friends, is where the next chapter of this story begins. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as compelling as we did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next.